A single confirmation, a quiet declaration. No grand ceremony, no palace briefing, just Edward's decisive acknowledgment that Catherine now stands as the sole trustee of Windsor Estate, and Camilla, not consulted, not warned, not included. In a monarchy built on protocol and hierarchy, this wasn't just paperwork, it was a seismic shift in power, and what this means for the future of the crown may be far more explosive than anyone anticipated. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It happened without spectacle, without the pageantry that usually cushions royal transitions. Edward did not raise his voice. He did not defend his reasoning in public. He simply confirmed it. Catherine now holds sole authority over Windsor Estate, the historic heart of royal continuity, the financial anchor beneath generations of sovereign stability. The language was clinical. The impact was anything but. Inside palace walls, the silence that followed was heavier than any scandal. Because this was not merely about property, it was about influence, about trust, about who is quietly being prepared for something far greater. Windsor Estate is not symbolic fluff, it is leverage disguised as tradition. Whoever governs it does not just oversee land and revenue, they shape the future positioning of the monarchy itself. To grant sole trusteeship is to grant confidence unwavering and exclusive, and Edward understood exactly what that message would signal. This was deliberate, calculated. A repositioning move disguised as administrative order. In royal politics, nothing this significant happens by accident. And then there was the absence. Camilla, a queen consort accustomed to consultation, found herself outside the decision. No briefing, no advisory role, no acknowledgement. For someone who has fought quietly for influence within the institution, the omission was not procedural, it was personal. Whispers began almost immediately. Was this oversight, or was it intentional distancing? Those closest to the situation understood that exclusion at this level is rarely incidental. It is strategic. Catherine, meanwhile, remained composed. Her public poise betrayed nothing, but beneath that calm exterior stood a woman now holding unprecedented control over one of the monarchy's most powerful assets. The confirmation elevated her beyond ceremony, beyond ribbon cuttings and patronages. It placed her at the center of structural authority, and Edward, long underestimated as the quieter architect of internal shifts, had drawn a clear line. The future, it seemed, would not look like the past. Inside the palace, conversations grew tense. Advisors measured their words. Long-standing loyalties felt tested. Some viewed Edward's decision as evolution, a necessary modernization of leadership dynamics. Others sensed fracture, because when power consolidates in one direction, it inevitably weakens another. The generational divide that had simmered beneath formal smiles began to sharpen, and at the heart of it all was a simple reality. Catherine had been entrusted alone. The public would eventually see headlines. Analysts would speculate, but internally, the emotional undercurrent ran deeper than commentary could capture. This was about succession without saying succession, preparation without proclamation. A rehearsal for responsibility that extends far beyond estate management, and those who understood the subtleties of royal signalling knew this was not a small gesture. It was a defining one, because in monarchies, authority is rarely seized, it is assigned piece by deliberate piece. Edward had assigned a piece that cannot easily be reclaimed. And as the magnitude of that confirmation settled across corridors, built on tradition, one truth began to crystallize. The balance inside the House of Windsor had shifted, but if Edward's confirmation was the spark, the real fire began when the implications of Windsor Estate's control became impossible to ignore. Windsor Estate is not just land, it is legacy, influence, quiet authority wrapped in centuries of tradition. Whoever controls it does not merely manage property, they shape royal visibility, access, and leverage. And now, with Catherine holding exclusive authority, an invisible axis of power has shifted. The question isn't why Edward confirmed it. The question is why Camilla was deliberately left out. For generations, Windsor Estate has functioned as the monarchy's silent engine. It has outlived wars, scandals, abdications, and reinventions. While crowns glitter and ceremonies dazzle the public, It is estates like Windsor that stabilize the institution behind the curtain. Revenue flows quietly, strategic decisions are made without applause, access is granted or withheld with subtle precision. The estate is not decoration, it is infrastructure. To oversee it is to hold a steady hand over the monarchy's economic heartbeat. Sole trusteeship changes everything. It removes shared oversight. It eliminates negotiated compromise. It signals complete confidence in one individual's judgment. When Edward confirmed Catherine as the only authority over Windsor Estate, he did more than elevate her role. He entrusted her with autonomy, financial discretion, long-term strategic planning. This is the kind of power that shapes philanthropic priorities, influences which royal initiatives receive support, and quietly determines whose vision defines the crown's next chapter. It is influence without spectacle, and therefore even more potent. Catherine's role, once framed primarily around race and representation, now expands into decisive governance. She is no longer simply in continuity, she is administrating it. With each initiative tied to Windsor's resources, her presence becomes more central. Her decisions ripple outward, charities align, partnerships form, visibility grows. What appears administrative becomes transformative, and behind that transformation lies Edward's unmistakable endorsement. But power gained is power rebalanced. Camilla's historical proximity to estate influence had long reinforced her quiet authority within the palace. Access to Windsor meant strategic positioning, subtle leverage in internal debates, and influence over royal optics. Being removed from consultation does not merely reduce participation, it alters hierarchy. It reframes standing. For someone who has navigated years of scrutiny to secure her place beside the throne, exclusion from such a pivotal decision carries emotional weight beyond protocol. Within royal circles, the generational divide is no longer theoretical. It is active. The older guard values tradition preserved exactly as it stands. The emerging leadership seeks adaptation wrapped in continuity. Catherine represents a future-facing monarchy, measured, modern, calculated. Camilla symbolizes hard-earned resilience within an older framework of influence. Edward's confirmation tilts momentum toward one vision over the other, and that tilt is impossible to ignore. Publicly, the shift may appear procedural. Privately, it reshapes alignment. Advisors recalibrate loyalties. Conversations carry sharper edges. Because when authority consolidates in a single figure, especially one increasingly seen as the monarchy's stabilizing force, it sends a signal about succession without uttering the word. And in an institution where symbolism is everything, that signal echoes loudly. As the estate's magnitude led into public consciousness, attention turned to one crucial question. Why was Camilla excluded from the conversation entirely? In royal politics, silence speaks louder than scandal. Camilla was not consulted, not informed, not positioned within the decision. For a queen consort accustomed to influence, this omission was more than procedural, it was personal, and insiders began to whisper that this wasn't oversight, it was strategy. Within the monarchy, senior consultation is not a courtesy, it is custom, it is ritual, it is the invisible glue that keeps hierarchy intact. Major decisions, especially those involving assets as powerful as Windsor Estate, traditionally move through layers of discussion before becoming official. That rhythm preserves unity, it protects appearances. So when Edward confirmed Catherine's sole trusteeship without looping Camilla into the process, the break from protocol felt deliberate. A deviation this precise does not happen accidentally inside an institution built on habit. For Camilla, the emotional impact cut deeper than headlines could capture. She had spent years navigating scrutiny, earning gradual acceptance, solidifying her role beside the king. Influence does not arrive overnight in the royal world, it is accumulated through patience and quiet resilience. To suddenly find herself outside a decision of this magnitude was not simply inconvenient. It threatened the perception of her standing, and in a monarchy where perception shapes power, that threat carries weight. Edward's posture throughout remained measured. He did not criticize, he did not confront, he simply moved forward. That subtle distancing was more powerful than open disagreement. By choosing Catherine exclusively, he signaled alignment, he indicated trust, and in doing so, he shifted gravitational pull away from Camilla's orbit. It was a quiet recalibration, almost clinical in its execution, but emotionally charged in its consequence. Catherine, meanwhile, maintained composure that bordered on impenetrable. She neither celebrated nor defended the decision publicly. Her restraint intensified speculation. Was she aware of the internal storm gathering? Almost certainly, yet her calm projected inevitability, as if this expansion of authority had always been part of a longer arc. The contrast was striking. Camilla confronting the emotional sting of exclusion, while Catherine stepped into amplified responsibility without visible friction. Success and suffering unfolding simultaneously, bound by one confirmation. Outside palace walls, reaction fractured into camps. Some praised the move as modernization, a necessary shift toward future stability. Others framed it as a cold sidelining of a queen consort who had endured enough controversy already. Public commentary buzzed, but inside the palace tension did not buzz. It tightened. Conversations became guarded. Advisors weighed their words more carefully. Because decisions like this do not exist in isolation. They trigger ripple effects in loyalty and alignment. Behind closed doors, alliances begin to evolve in response to shifts like these. Individuals once positioned close to Camilla may now reconsider proximity. Those betting on the future of the monarchy may see Catherine's rise as the safer investment, and as loyalties adjust quietly, the institution itself inches toward transformation. The omission that felt personal may, in time, reveal itself as foundational. But Edward's move didn't emerge in isolation. It was rooted in months of strategic repositioning few outside the inner circle fully understood. Edward has long been underestimated, the quiet architect operating in the background. But confirming Catherine as sole trustee revealed something new. Intention, precision, a deliberate recalibration of royal influence. This was not impulsive. It was engineered. For years, Edward existed in the periphery of public fascination. Never the loudest voice. Never the headlined magnate, yet within palace structures, influence is not measured by visibility. It is measured by positioning. And slowly, almost invisibly, Edward's role began to evolve. He moved from ceremonial reliability to strategic presence. His counsel grew weightier. His involvement in institutional matters expanded. While others commanded attention, Edward built quiet credibility, the kind that earned trust in moments when recalibration becomes necessary. Those close to the inner workings speak of months of preparation, conversations held behind closed doors, subtle reviews of financial oversight, discussions about sustainability, modernization, and long-term resilience. Windsor Estate did not suddenly become a focal point. It was examined, evaluated, and ultimately reassigned with deliberate care. The confirmation of Catherine as sole trustee was the visible tip of a much deeper structural shift. By the time the announcement emerged, the groundwork had already been laid. Edward's alignment with Catherine was not accidental. It reflected a shared philosophy about the monarchy's future. Both represent stability without stagnation, tradition adapted rather than discarded. In Catherine, Edward may have seen continuity that resonates with a modern public, a leader capable of carrying heritage forward without appearing trapped by it. Entrusting her with exclusive authority was a signal to insiders that the next era would not merely preserve the institution, it would refine it, and refinement often requires displacement. Traditionalist figures who once relied on established influence structures began to feel the ground shift beneath them. Authority that once flowed through familiar channels was quietly redirected. The sidelining was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. No confrontation, no declaration, just decisions made without consultation, roles narrowed without announcement. It is in these quiet recalibrations that true power realigns. The generational divide that had simmered beneath polite unity now reveals itself more clearly. Future-facing royals emphasize adaptability, transparency, and strategic modernization. The older hierarchy leans toward continuity rooted in precedent. Edward's move did not ignite the divide, it illuminated it. By consolidating authority in Catherine's hands, he cast his vote for evolution over preservation of old influence patterns. This was never about spectacle, it was about trajectory. Edward understood that the monarchy's survival depends not only on ceremonial grace, but on structural strength. By strengthening Catherine's institutional footing, he fortified the future while quietly redefining present alliances, and those observing closely can sense that this confirmation may be remembered not as a singular decision, but as the pivot point when quiet influence became decisive direction. Because beneath the surface of royal tradition, transformation often arrives dressed as administration, and in confirming Catherine's trusteeship, Edward may have initiated something far larger than estate governance, a reshaping of internal power that will echo for years. And at the center of this strategic evolution stood Catherine, no longer just a princess, but a power figure redefining royal leadership itself. For years, Catherine perfected poise, grace, under scrutiny, but beneath the polished exterior, a transformation was underway. Becoming sole trustee of Windsor Estate wasn't symbolic, it was sovereign influence without the crown. And with Edward's backing, her authority now extends far beyond public appearances. From the moment she entered the royal sphere, Catherine understood the assignment. She would be watched, measured, compared, every gesture dissected, every word weighed. She responded, not with defiance, but with discipline. Calm consistency became her armor. Yet while the world focused on her elegance, something quieter was taking shape. Experience, strategic patience. A strategic patience, a deep understanding of how influence inside the monarchy is rarely loud, but always intentional. Her rise has never been dramatic in the theatrical sense. It has been steady, relentless, each responsibility absorbed without complaint, each public challenge navigated without visible fracture. That steadiness built trust not only with the public, but within the institution itself. And trust, in a monarchy that survives on continuity, is the rarest currency of all. Edward's confirmation did not create her authority, it acknowledged it. Public perception often paints Catherine as the embodiment of stability, the reassuring future queen. But private power is different from public approval. Private power determines direction. As sole trustee of Windsor Estate, she now holds leverage that shapes priorities behind the scenes. Funding decisions, strategic partnerships, long-term planning. This is governance at its core. It is not about waving from balconies. It is about deciding what the crown invests in, and by extension, what it becomes. The symbolism of exclusive trust cannot be overstated. In royal tradition, shared oversight softens hierarchy, sole authority sharpens it. Edward's endorsement places Catherine in a position that subtly mirrors sovereign responsibility. It sends a message without announcing one. Stability is being prepared, continuity is being secured. The future is being structured before it formally arrives. And in that structuring lies an implicit declaration about succession, not of title, but of influence. Yet every ascent casts a shadow. As Catherine's institutional presence expands, others feel contraction. Camilla's leverage, once reinforced by proximity to estate oversight, narrows. Influence that once flowed through established channels now redirects toward a new center. The contrast is stark. One figure consolidating authority with composed strength, another confronting the quiet erosion of consultative power. Success and displacement unfolding side by side, bound by the same confirmation. This moment is not isolated. It foreshadows restructuring that extends beyond one estate. It suggests a monarchy refining its hierarchy in anticipation of future demands. Catherine's empowerment signals modernization, anchored in tradition, a recalibration designed to reassure a public that craves both continuity and progress. And with each decision she makes, the scaffolding of a new royal order strengthens. But empowerment inside palace walls rarely travels unchallenged. Authority invites scrutiny, it invites quiet resistance. And as Catherine steps further into institutional command, the emotional undercurrents intensify. Because transformation, even when graceful, unsettles those invested in the old equilibrium. Yet with every rise comes resistance, and the quiet corridors of Buckingham Palace were anything but calm. When power shifts, loyalty fractures, advisors whispered, alliances hardened. Some viewed Edward's confirmation as necessary evolution. Others saw it as betrayal, and Camilla's absence from the decision began to feel less like protocol and more like displacement. Inside the palace, unity has always been carefully curated. Differences are managed behind closed doors, polished before they reach public view. But this decision cut through that polish. Conversations that once flowed with polite caution grew sharper. Advisors who had long aligned themselves, best with established hierarchies, suddenly recalculated their positions. The question was no longer whether Catherine had authority, it was how far that authority would extend and who would be left standing when the dust settled. Factions began to form, though never openly. Some saw Catherine's elevation as a strategic safeguard for the monarchy's future, a sign that the institution was finally preparing for inevitable generational transition. Others, more loyal to Camilla's gradual consolidation of influence, viewed the move as a cold dismissal of her years of endurance. Loyalty within royal courts is rarely emotional alone. It is strategic, and strategy shifts quickly when power consolidates in a new direction. Private advisors reportedly clashed in tone, if not in volume. Some argued that modernization demanded bold reassignment of authority. Others warned that abrupt recalibration risked destabilizing internal harmony. The debate was not about Windsor Estate alone. It was about vision, about whether the monarchy should lean forward into renewal or hold firmly to structures that had carried it for decades. And in that debate, Edward's confirmation served as the catalyst. King Charles found himself in an especially delicate position. As sovereign, his silence carried as much weight as any declaration. Publicly composed, privately measured, he faced a balancing act between loyalty to his consort and endorsement of institutional continuity. His authority binds the monarchy together, yet even he cannot prevent the emotional tremors that follow shifts in influence. His restraint only deepened speculation. Was his quiet acceptance a sign of agreement, or an effort to avoid amplifying division? Generational contrasts sharpened the divide further. Catherine represents disciplined renewal stability wrapped in adaptation. Camilla embodies resilience earned through struggle, within the older framework of royal power. One figure ascending through strategic trust, the other navigating the subtle narrowing of consultative reach. The contrast is not loud, but it is unmistakable, and it intensifies with every whispered discussion. Beyond palace gates, media narratives magnified tension. Headlines framed the confirmation as either visionary leadership or calculated sidelining. Public commentary layered opinion over assumption. Every silence was interpreted. Every absence analyzed. The monarchy, once shielded by distance, now found its internal recalibration unfolding under relentless scrutiny. And scrutiny, in an institution built on perception, is combustible. Emotionally, the strain deepened within the family itself. Success for one inevitably meant discomfort for another, triumph intertwined with displacement. Confidence tested by uncertainty. The House of Windsor has weathered storms before, but this one felt different, quieter, more strategic, yet no less powerful. Because this was not scandal erupting from chaos, it was change unfolding by design. And as loyalties tightened and philosophies collided, one truth became undeniable. The internal divide would not remain contained forever, but if the palace was divided, the public reaction would prove even more unpredictable. The moment news surfaced, social media ignited. Catherine hailed as modern monarch in waiting, Camilla questioned, Edward analysed. The monarchy, once distant and controlled, now found itself dissected in real time, and the narrative spiraled beyond palace walls. What had begun as an internal confirmation quickly transformed into a public spectacle. Commentators praised Catherine's elevation as proof that the crown was finally preparing for a future defined by steadiness and strategic clarity. Supporters described her as disciplined, composed, ready. They saw the trusteeship not merely as administrative authority, but as affirmation that she embodies continuity without complacency. To them, this was reassurance wrapped in action, a monarchy thinking ahead instead of clinging behind. Yet admiration was matched by discomfort. Critics framed Camilla's exclusion as symbolic displacement, arguing that the omission reflected deeper fractures beneath formal unity. For those sympathetic to her long path toward acceptance, the decision felt abrupt, even ruthless. The public rarely witnesses royal recalibration so clearly, and when it does, empathy and judgment collide. Catherine's rise appeared decisive. Camilla's silence appeared heavy, and the contrast fueled debate. Headlines amplified every angle. Some proclaimed a strategic masterstroke, Others hinted at cold internal politics. Each interpretation layered speculation over limited information, and the absence of detailed explanation only intensified curiosity. In a digital era where narrative moves faster than confirmation, the monarchy could no longer rely on controlled statements to guide perception. The story belonged to the public, now reshaped, reframed, reinterpreted by millions. Royal historians entered the conversation, dissecting precedent. They examined past instances of estate oversight and compared generational transitions. Some described Edward's move as a natural progression toward modernization. Others noted that sole trusteeship of such magnitude carried implications rarely assigned so explicitly. Their debates elevated the moment beyond gossip. This was not trivial. It was historically resonant. The monarchy's vulnerability to modern scrutiny became unmistakable. In earlier eras, decisions of this nature would have unfolded quietly, absorbed within palace walls. Now, transparency, whether intended or forced, exposed institutional shifts to immediate global reaction. Crown, once buffered by distance, now navigates public emotion as much as internal strategy. Every gesture echoes, every silence invites interpretation, and within that whirlwind, Catherine's image strengthened. To many, she represented stability amid noise, a calm axis around which speculation spun. Her authority seemed measured, not flamboyant. That restraint only deepened public confidence. Meanwhile, Camilla's reduced visibility sharpened questions about influence and hierarchy. The contrast painted a monarchy in transition, caught between tradition and reinvention. This moment marked more than an estate decision. It signaled a turning point in how royal power is perceived and discussed. The crown's image entered a new era, one shaped as much by public reaction as private strategy, and as admiration and criticism intertwined, one reality grew impossible to ignore. The narrative had expanded beyond property into prophecy, yet beneath the applause and outrage, one deeper question lingered. Was this about Windsor Estate, or about the future of the throne itself? Every monarchy survives by adapting, and sometimes adaptation demands uncomfortable decisions. By confirming Catherine's sole authority over Windsor Estate, Edward may have signalled something far greater, a quiet rehearsal for future sovereignty. History shows that power rarely transfers in a single dramatic moment. It moves gradually, almost imperceptibly, through assignments of responsibility that prepare the ground long before a crown changes hands. Trusteeship of Windsor Estate is not a ceremonial token. It is structural authority. It is stewardship over legacy, wealth, and institutional direction. In granting Catherine exclusive control, Edward may not have declared succession, but he rehearsed it. He positioned her not merely as a future queen in waiting, but as a present architect of continuity. Catherine now stands as a stabilizing axis in a monarchy navigating modern turbulence. Public trust in institutions rises and falls quickly, yet her steady composure anchors perception. By placing estate authority in her hands, Edward reinforced that anchor. He strengthened the idea that stability does not wait for coronation. It begins earlier, shaped quietly through responsibility. The message is subtle but unmistakable. Preparation is underway. Within this shift, Camilla's influence enters a new historical context. Her journey into royal legitimacy was marked by resilience and gradual acceptance. For years, she embodied endurance within a system reluctant to fully embrace her. Yet history is not sentimental, it evolves, and as Catherine's authority consolidates, Camilla's role recalibrates, not erased, not dismissed, but repositioned within a hierarchy that now prioritizes forward-facing continuity. The emotional contrast is stark, one figure rising through structured empowerment, another adjusting to narrowed institutional reach. Edward's decision also speaks to legacy. Quiet figures often leave their mark not through grand speeches, but through strategic placements. By consolidating Windsor Estate under Catherine's stewardship, Edward inscribed his influence into the monarchy's next chapter. He ensured that future leadership would inherit not only symbolic authority, but practiced governance. This is long-term thinking disguised as administration. Strategic consolidation of royal assets is rarely random. It reflects careful anticipation of future pressures, economic, political, cultural, in an era when scrutiny intensifies and tradition alone cannot shield relevance. Strengthening the operational foundation becomes essential. Catherine's trusteeship fortifies that foundation. It centralizes oversight, it streamlines direction, it narrows ambiguity, and in doing so, it subtly shifts generational balance. The long-term implications extend beyond Windsor's gates. As Catherine's role deepens, advisors align accordingly, loyalties adjust, future initiatives orbit her vision. The monarchy's center of gravity inches toward a new focal point. The transition is not abrupt, yet it is undeniable. Quiet rehearsals shape inevitable outcomes. What makes this moment profound is not spectacle, but timing. Edward's confirmation arrived before necessity demanded it. That foresight suggests intentional design rather than reactive adjustment. And in monarchies, foresight often signals inevitability. The crown may not yet rest differently, but the structure beneath it has shifted. And as the dust settles, one final revelation forces us to confront the real consequence of Edward's confirmation. History rarely announces itself loudly. Sometimes it moves quietly through confirmations, signatures, calculated silences. Edward's acknowledgment did more than elevate Catherine. It redrew invisible lines of influence, and Camilla's exclusion may mark the beginning of a new royal hierarchy. What began as a confirmation has matured into consolidation. Catherine now stands not only as trustee of Windsor Estate, but as the focal point of institutional confidence. Authority that once felt shared now feels centered. Responsibilities that once seemed preparatory now feel defining. This is not symbolic promotion, it is structural empowerment. The estate, the financial backbone, the strategic anchor, the silent engine of royal continuity, rests firmly in her hands, and through that consolidation, the monarchy's direction becomes clearer. At the same time, the ceremonial weight of exclusion has begun to fade into something more consequential. Camilla's absence from consultation is no longer framed as oversight. It has become part of a broader narrative, influence. Inside the palace does not disappear overnight, but it narrows quietly. The space she once occupied within estate matters has shifted, and that shift alters perception. In royal politics, perception shapes permanence. What is not consulted gradually becomes what is not central. Emotionally, the aftermath lingers. Within any family, especially one burdened by history and hierarchy, success for one member can carry unintended cost for another. There are conversations we will never hear, private reckonings, moments of tension behind composed expressions. Catherine steps forward with strengthened legitimacy, while Camilla confronts the evolving boundaries of her influence. Triumph and recalibration unfolding side by side. The contrast is powerful, it is human, and it is irreversible. Windsor Estate now stands as more than property. It is the cornerstone of a future reign in practice, before proclamation. Through stewardship comes experience. Through experience comes authority. Edward understood this. His confirmation was not impulsive, it was visionary. By anchoring Catherine within the operational heart of the monarchy, he shaped a legacy that will extend beyond his own tenure. He fortified the institution not through spectacle, but through strategic placement. This moment will be remembered not for drama, but for direction. A quiet pivot toward generational renewal. A recalibration that favors preparation over hesitation. The monarchy does not collapse under change. It evolves through it, and with Catherine positioned at the helm of its most enduring asset, that evolution gains momentum. The House of Windsor now enters a reshaped era of leadership. Stability is no longer theoretical, it is being practiced. Authority is no longer implied, it is being exercised. The future has not been declared, yet it is being built, and those watching closely can sense that something fundamental has shifted, not with noise, but with certainty. Because in the House of Windsor, power is never surrendered, it is reassigned, and the consequences of this reassignment are only just beginning to unfold. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.